Okay, we started a sort of new part of our study last week. We looked at the book of Exodus, which ended with the Israelites at Mount Sinai. But we want to continue the story and see the journey of the Israelites from Mount Sinai to the verge of their entry into the Promised Land. It's a period that covers something like 38 years that we're looking at here. And last week we saw in Numbers chapter 10 the people departing from Mount Sinai and beginning their journey, and noted the order in which the tribes were arranged for their march, for their procession, and how the Ark of the Covenant was in the front leading that procession, and the different parts of the tabernacle were being carried by families from the tribe of Levi, who were arranged in their particular order amongst the tribes there. But soon after the people had left, they began complaining, and we saw that in chapter 11. Uh, we weren't told exactly what they were complaining about, but at the beginning of chapter 11, they were complaining about their misfortunes. And in response to that, the Lord sent fire amongst them, which destroyed some outlying parts of the camp. And Moses had intervened and prayed to the people, and the Lord ended the fire. The fire stopped. And that place was given the name of Taberah in chapter 11 there. And then as they moved on from there, there was a further complaint as the people had this strong desire to eat meat. They were fed up with eating manna, and they wanted more variety in their diet, and they were thinking back to the time in Egypt when they ate fish and various vegetables and different types of fruit, and had that longing for something different, some variation in their diet. And they went to Moses and complained about this, and Moses was really at the end of his tether, really, and struggling to deal with the people. He's finding it difficult and speaks of it as being a burden. He goes to God, prays to God about it, that this burden is laid upon him, and really expresses his wish that if possible, God would just kill him so he wouldn't have to deal with these people. Well, God answered Moses' prayer, first of all by making the appointment of 70 elders who would assist Moses in his responsibilities of leadership. And then God said that he would provide meat for the people. Moses was a bit incredulous about that and wondered, well, how is God going to provide meat for 600,000 people? But again, God does as he says he will do, and uh, God sends the quail, great numbers of quail, which fell around the camp. And the people gathered in the quail and were gorging themselves on the quail. And God then expressed his anger towards them, and a great plague came upon the people, so that some of them died. We're told whilst they were still eating their meat, whilst the meat was between their teeth. The anger of the Lord was kindled, and this great plague came upon them. And they named that place there Kibroth Hatava, which means graves of craving, where these people died because of that. And they moved on from there then to a place called Hazroth. So on the map that we've got here, we can see the journey. We're following the journey on the red line. So they've been down in Mount Sinai in the south there, and now they're heading north, and they're at Hazroth there, which you can just see on the map there. So we continue the story here in the book of Numbers in chapter 12. And the first incident we have here concerns Miriam and Aaron and their opposition, their challenge to Moses' authority. So read here chapter 12, verses 1 to 3, which said, Miriam and Aaron spoke against Moses because of the Cushite woman whom he had married, for he had married a Cushite woman. And they said, has the Lord indeed spoken only through Moses? Has he not spoken through us also? And the Lord heard it. Now the man Moses was very meek, more than all men that were on the face of the earth. So whilst the people are there at Hazroth, an incident occurs here in which the authority of Moses is challenged by his sister Miriam and his brother Aaron, both of whom are older than Moses. And the problem seems to have arisen over Moses' marriage to a Cushite woman mentioned in verse 1 there. So they spoke against Moses because of the Cushite woman whom he had married. It's not clear who this Cushite woman is, whether it's Moses' wife Zipporah, or a second wife that Moses has married. Zipporah was the daughter of Reuel, or Jethro as he's also called, whom Moses had married when he was in the land of Midian. And his marriage to Zipporah is recorded back in Exodus chapter 2 and verse 21. If you remember back to when we were looking at this, Moses kills the Egyptian and then he has to flee. He flees to the land of Midian, where he works for Jethro or Reuel as a shepherd, and he's given his daughter Zipporah in marriage. So verse 21 of Exodus 2 says, "And Moses was content to dwell with the man, and he gave Moses his daughter Zipporah." Uh, but it seems that Zipporah was not with Moses, though, when he returned to Egypt and led the Israelites out. But she did join him later when she came to Moses with her father and with their two sons. And that was in Exodus chapter 18, in verses 1 to 5. Which says, "Jethro, the priest of Midian, Moses' father-in-law, heard of all that God had done for Moses and for Israel, his people, how the Lord had brought Israel out of Egypt. Now Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, had taken Zipporah, Moses' wife, after he had sent her away, and her two sons, of whom the name of one was Gershom, for he said, I've been a sojourner in a foreign land, and the name of the other Eliezer, for he said, the God of my father was my help and delivered me from the sword of Pharaoh. And Jethro, Moses' father-in-law, came with his sons and his wife to Moses in the wilderness, where he was encamped at the mountain of God." So Zipporah had joined Moses at that point when they're at Mount Sinai. But we know nothing further about Zipporah after that. Cush here, the word Cush normally refers to Ethiopia, to the south of Egypt, and some think then that this Cushite woman mentioned here who Moses married then was an Ethiopian. Others, those think that here Cush refers to Midian, Zipporah's home, and so they identify Zipporah as the Cushite woman. In the prophet Habakkuk in chapter 3 and verse 7, the name Cushan is used there in reference to Midian, and sort of based on this, that the assumption is made that Cush is also a name of Midian as well. Habakkuk chapter 3 verse 7 says, "I saw the tents of Cushan in affliction, the curtains of the land of Midian did tremble." So Midian identified as Cushan there. So we don't really know who the woman was, so whether it was Zipporah or what happened to Zipporah. Did she die? Did Moses divorce her? Who was the Cushite woman that he married? Was she from Ethiopia? But for some unexplained reason here, Moses' marriage to the Cushite woman, whoever she may have been, was this cause of contention with Miriam and Aaron. But really, their displeasure over Moses' marriage was just an excuse for them to make a more serious challenge to Moses' authority and his role as mediator between God and Israel. So in verse 2, they said, "Has the Lord indeed spoken only through Moses? Has he not spoken through us also?" So they're claiming to have equal authority with Moses. The Lord speaks with them too, they are saying. From the prophet Micah, in Micah chapter 6, verse 4, all three of them are mentioned together here with sort of no distinction being drawn between them. Of course, Micah's written a long time after the time of Moses, but is making reference to events from that time. Micah chapter 6, verse 4. God says, "For I brought you up from the land of Egypt and redeemed you from the house of bondage, and I sent before you Moses, Aaron, and Miriam." So God's saying there that he had sent to Israel the three of them, Moses, Aaron, and Miriam. Miriam is referred to as a prophetess in Exodus chapter 15 and verse 20 when she sings that song after they have crossed the Red Sea. So she is a prophetess. Aaron had acted as Moses' mouthpiece, you may recall, to convey God's words to the people. And to Pharaoh, Moses had said to God that he wasn't very good at speaking, and God said, "Well, I'll send your brother Aaron, and he will act as your spokesman." And now, of course, Aaron is the high priest as well, so representing the people before God. So Miriam and Aaron were in a sort of special position there, that they did have these special positions. But the complaint that they make here cannot be hidden from God, and we're told, "And the Lord heard it," as indeed the Lord hears everything. Verse 3 summarizes the character of Moses when it says, "Now the man Moses was very meek." Some versions have humble there, that he was humble, "more than all men who were on the face of the earth." So Moses' meekness, this characteristic of Moses, or his humility, stands in contrast to the arrogance of Miriam and Aaron, and perhaps may explain why, when his own position was being challenged, that Moses remained silent and he didn't react to the words of Miriam and Aaron. Doesn't appear to have done so anyway, so he's content just to leave things with God. So we read on in the account here in verses 4 to 8 of Numbers chapter 12, which goes on to say, "And suddenly the Lord said to Moses and to Aaron and Miriam, 'Come out, you three, to the tent of meeting.' And the three of them came out, and the Lord came down in a pillar of fire and stood at the door of the tent and called Aaron and Miriam, and they both came forward. And he said, 'Hear my words. If there is a prophet among you, I, the Lord, make myself known to him in a vision. I speak with him in a dream. Not so with my servant Moses. He is entrusted with all my house. With him I speak mouth to mouth, clearly, and not in dark speech, and he beholds the form of the Lord. Why then were you not afraid to speak against my servant Moses?'" So the Lord spoke to all three of them, and he summoned them to the tent of meeting, a bit like being called into the head teacher's office or called into the boss's office at work. And the presence of the Lord then came down in this pillar of cloud, which stood at the door of the tent. Again, God's presence being shown through the cloud, which we see consistently in the accounts here. The Lord called Aaron and Moses to come forward, and he spoke to them to explain the distinction that he makes between a prophet and Moses. God says that he will communicate with a prophet through visions and dreams. But in the case of Moses, he says he is entrusted with all my house. With him I speak mouth to mouth, clearly, and not in dark speech, and he beholds the form of the Lord. So the Lord's unique relationship with Moses is made clear here, this distinction between how God communicates with the prophets and how God communicates with Moses. And the Lord has entrusted Moses with the care of all of his house. In other words, Israel, that God has put Moses in that position of leading Israel, entrusting everything with him. This is mentioned in the book, the letter to the Hebrews in the New Testament, Hebrews chapter 3, verses 1 to 6, where a comparison is being drawn between Moses and Jesus, to show the greatness of Jesus in comparison to Moses, that the writer makes reference to this incident here of Moses being entrusted with all God's house. Hebrews chapter 3 begins, "Therefore, holy brethren, who share in a heavenly call, consider Jesus, the apostle and high priest of our confession. He was faithful to him who appointed him, just as Moses also was faithful in God's house. Yet Jesus has been counted worthy of as much more glory than Moses, as the builder of a house has more honor than the house. For every house is built by someone, but the builder of all things is God. Now Moses was faithful in all God's house as a servant, to testify to the things that were to be spoken later. But Christ was faithful over God's house as a son, and we are his house if we hold fast our confidence and pride in our hope." So the writer's making the point there that Moses was a faithful servant in God's house. Jesus was a faithful son in God's house. The Lord speaks, says here that he speaks directly to Moses, mouth to mouth, and also that Moses has seen the form of the Lord, that he's been privileged to have those appearances of the Lord. And so the Lord then asks Miriam and Aaron, "Why then were you not afraid to speak against my servant Moses?" Considering the position that Moses is in, why did you think it was okay to challenge his authority in this way? We go on then in verses 9 to 16 here to see the conclusion of the story. And the anger of the Lord was kindled against them, and he departed. And when the cloud removed from over the tent, behold, Miriam was leprous, as white as snow. And Aaron turned towards Miriam, and behold, she was leprous. And Aaron said to Moses, "O my Lord, do not punish us, because we have done foolishly and have sinned. Let her not be as one dead, of whom the flesh is half consumed when he comes out of his mother's womb." And Moses cried to the Lord, "Heal her, O God, I beseech thee." But the Lord said to Moses, "If her father had but spit in her face, should she not be shamed 7 days? Let her be shut up outside the camp 7 days, and after that she may be brought in again." So Miriam was shut up outside the camp 7 days, and the people did not set out on the march till Miriam was brought in again. After that the people set out from Hazeroth and encamped in the wilderness of Paran. So the Lord's anger was directed against Miriam and Aaron, and after the cloud, the presence of God was taken up from over the tent, Miriam was leprous, described as being white as snow. And Aaron saw her condition, and he appealed to Moses on her behalf, acknowledging their foolishness and their sin. "O my Lord, do not punish us, because we have done foolishly and have sinned. Let her not be as one dead, of whom the flesh is half consumed when he comes out of his mother's womb." Aaron may have been spared leprosy, as he was the high priest, and he would not be able to function as high priest if he had been struck with leprosy. The leprosy that's often mentioned in the Bible is not the modern disease of leprosy, which is known as Hansen's disease. But the word that's used in the Bible is a general term for any kind of skin condition. And such a condition would make a person ceremonially unclean and would require them to live in isolation until the condition had cleared up. And then now after that, they had to make various offerings to show that they had been cleansed of it. In Leviticus chapter 13 and verse 46, we are told here of how they were to be isolated. Leviticus, 2 chapters there, chapter 13 and 14, go into a lot of detail about uh, leprosy and what was needed to be done if a person had leprosy. But verse 45 of chapter 13 says, "The leper who has the disease shall wear torn clothes, and let the hair of his head hang loose, and he shall cover his upper lip and cry, Unclean, unclean. He shall remain unclean as long as he has the disease. He is unclean. He shall dwell alone in a habitation outside the camp." So it had to be outside of the camp in isolation. And then also Numbers chapter 5, verses 1 to 4 gives similar details here. "The Lord said to Moses, Command the people of Israel that they put out of the camp every leper and everyone having a discharge and everyone that is unclean through contact with the dead. You shall put out both male and female, putting them outside the camp, that they may not defile their camp in the midst of which I dwell." And the people of Israel did so and drove them outside the camp as the Lord said to Moses, so the people of Israel did. So Moses here then prayed to God for Miriam to be healed with this desperate cry, "Heal her, O God, I beseech thee." And the Lord's response to Moses' prayer was to order Miriam out of the camp for 7 days of isolation, after which she was brought back into the camp. And her challenge to Moses' authority was as insulting as if her father had spat in her face. And if that had happened, she would also be unclean and would have to be outside of the camp for 7 days as well. So although Miriam was punished and publicly shamed for challenging Moses' authority, she was treated mercifully by God and allowed to resume her place in the camp after 7 days. This delayed the departure of the people from Hazroth, that they waited there until Miriam was back in the camp. And then verse 16 tells us that they left Hazroth and encamped in the wilderness of Paran. So they continue on their journey now, and the little map there shows the continuation of that journey up towards Kadesh. So we come to chapter 13 then, and after the people had arrived in the wilderness of Paran and came to Kadesh, which is at the southern border of the land of Canaan, the Lord instructed Moses to send men to spy out the land which he is giving to the people of Israel. Verses 1 to 3 of chapter 13 of the book of Numbers says this: "The Lord said to Moses, Send men to spy out the land of Canaan, which I give to the people of Israel. From each tribe of their fathers shall you send a man, every one a leader among them." So Moses sent them from the wilderness of Paran, according to the command of the Lord, all of them men who were heads of the people of Israel. So this is being done in preparation for what should be the triumphant invasion and occupation of the land and the fulfillment of God's promise to give them the land. So 12 spies then were chosen, one representative from each of the tribes, and each one of them a leader amongst the people. And we're told that Moses did so according to the command of the Lord. So again, as always, he's following God's instructions. The names of the spies and the tribes that they represented are listed there from verse 4 down to verse 15. We won't read through all of them there, but there are two names that are of note that we should take note of, and that's Caleb, the son of Jephunneh from the tribe of Judah, and Hoshea, the son of Nun from the tribe of Ephraim. And we're told that Moses gave the name Joshua to Hoshea, the son of Nun. And the name Joshua means the Lord is salvation, or the Lord saves. Jesus is the Greek form of the name Joshua, which, of course, Jesus we find in the New Testament there. And we've met Joshua, or Hoshea, Earlier in the book of Exodus, in Exodus chapter 17, he led the Israelites in battle against the Amalekites. He serves as Moses' assistant. We see him going up the mountain with Moses at Mount Sinai. So we've already got to know a little bit about Joshua, but here he is, one of the spies from the tribe of Ephraim who is being sent into the land. So we see their mission here in chapter 13, verse 17 to 24, which says, Moses sent them to spy out the land of Canaan and said to them, Go up into the Negeb yonder and go up into the hill country and see what the land is and whether the people who dwell in it are strong or weak, whether they are few or many, and whether the land that they dwell in is good or bad, and whether the cities that they dwell in are camps or strongholds, and whether the land is rich or poor, and whether there is wood in it or not. Be of good courage and bring some of the fruit of the land. Now the time was the season of the first ripe grapes. So they went up and spied out the land from the wilderness of Zin to Rehob near the entrance of Hamath. They went up into the Negeb and into Hebron and Ahiman, Shishai and Talmai. The descendants of Anak were there. Hebron was built 7 years before Zoan in Egypt. And they came to the valley of Eshcol, and cut down from there a branch with a single cluster of grapes, and they carried it on a pole between two of them. They brought also some pomegranates and figs. That place was called the valley of Eshcol because of the cluster which the men of Israel cut down from there. So the mission for these men is to go into the land of Canaan and assess the strength of the inhabitants there and the productivity or the fruitfulness of the land. They're to go from the Negeb, which is in the south, through the central hill country and up to Rehob in the far north. And they're to see what the people of the land are like, whether they are strong or weak, whether there are few of them or many of them, and they are to assess the land itself, whether it is good or bad, whether it's rich or poor, and whether there is wood in it or not. And they are to assess whether the cities of the land are camps or whether they're strongholds. So are people just living in tents or have they built strong cities? And they're to bring back with them a sample of the fruit of the land. And we're told in verse 20 that they left for this mission in the season of the first ripe grapes. And that would date this around late July time on our calendar. So it's about 2 months now since they left Mount Sinai. Their journey here would be a round trip there and back of around 500 miles. It's summarized in verses 21 and 22. At Hebron, a place closely associated with Abraham and the patriarchs, Abraham and Sarah were buried at Hebron. Hebron, they came across some of the descendants of Anak. Anak must have been a renowned warrior. Names given there, Ahiman, Shishai, and Talmai. And then as a sort of side note of interest for those who had lived in Egypt, it's mentioned that Hebron was built 7 years before Zoan. Zoan was the capital of Egypt, also known as Tanis or Avaris, from the 18th to the 16th century BC. So that little note sort of ties it all in with the Israelites coming out of Egypt and being familiar with Egypt, a sort of note of which would be of interest to them. When they arrived in the valley of Eshcol, they cut down a branch with a single cluster of grapes, and it was so large it had to be carried on a pole between two of them. And they brought also samples of pomegranates and figs. And the place where they gathered the grapes was named Eshcol, a word which means cluster, because of the cluster of grapes there. On the maps, series of maps here, you can see their journey beginning in the top left-hand corner. They leave from Kadesh Barnea, head up north, get to Hebron there and continue further north. And then the map in the top right-hand corner shows their journey up through the land as far as what in the New Testament refers to as the Lake Galilee, Sea of Galilee. So they get up there, and then beyond that, bottom left-hand corner map, they get as far as Rehob in the far north, and then in the final map, bottom right-hand corner, is their return journey from Rehob back down to Kadesh Barnea. So it's a reconnaissance mission throughout the land there. And when they arrive back, they make a report. They spend 40 days in the land of Canaan, and they returned to Moses and Aaron and the people who are waiting at Kadesh in the wilderness of Paran. So the report here, chapter 13, verse 25 to 29. At the end of 40 days, they returned from spying out the land, and they came to Moses and Aaron and to all the congregation of the people of Israel in the wilderness of Paran at Kadesh. They brought back word to them and to all the congregation and showed them the fruit of the land. And they told him, "We came to the land to which you sent us. It flows with milk and honey, and this is its fruit. Yet the people who dwell in the land are strong, and the cities are fortified and very large. And besides, we saw the descendants of Anak there. The Amalekites dwell in the land of the Negeb. The Hittites, the Jebusites, and the Amorites dwell in the hill country, and the Canaanites dwell by the sea and along the Jordan." So they deliver their report and saying that the land flows with milk and honey, which is a description of a fruitful land. It's a good land. And as an example of that fruitfulness, they presented the produce that they had brought back, the grapes and the pomegranates and the figs. However, there are obstacles and difficulties if the land is to be conquered. The people of the land are strong, and they live in very large, well-fortified cities. And furthermore, the descendants of Anak are there, a people with a fearsome reputation and noted for their great stature. And they also report on the regions of the land that are occupied by the different populations. So the Amalekites dwell in the Negeb, which is in the south. The Hittites, the Jebusites, and the Amorites dwell in the central hill country, whilst the Canaanites dwell on the coast by the sea and also along the Jordan Valley. So this is really a factual report that they are presenting. This is what we saw, and they're just reporting back on what they had seen. Well, we go on then, verses 30 to 33, down to the end of the chapter. But Caleb quieted the people before Moses and said, "Let us go up at once and occupy it, for we are well able to overcome it." Then the men who had gone up with him said, "We are not able to go up against the people, for they are stronger than we." So they brought to the people of Israel an evil report of the land which they had spied out, saying, "The land through which we have gone to spy it out is a land that devours its inhabitants, and all the people that we saw in it are men of great stature. And there we saw the Nephilim, the sons of Anak who come from the Nephilim. And we seemed to ourselves like grasshoppers, and so we seemed to them." So the report seemed to have produced a bit of a disturbance amongst the people. Perhaps when they heard it, some doubts have been sown in their minds. But Caleb, the spy who had gone representing the tribe of Judah, now quietened the people down, and he encouraged them to go up at once and occupy the land. He said, "For we are well able to overcome it. We can do this. We can go and take it." So Caleb took this positive view of the situation. From the following chapter, chapter 14, which we'll look at next week, we know that Joshua shared Caleb's view as well, that in chapter 14, verses 6 to 9. However, the other spies who had gone with Caleb and Joshua had seen the same things that they saw contradicted this view. And they say, we are not able to go up against the people, for they are stronger than we. So now we've got into the realm, they've gone beyond just giving a factual report. They've gone into an expression of opinion and interpretation. That Caleb's opinion is, we can do it. The others said, we can't do it. They're stronger than we. And we're told here that they gave to the people an evil report of the land, a false report. They say it's a land that devours its inhabitants. It's a hostile environment that eats up the people. And all of the people of the land are physically strong. The Nephilim, the sons of Anak, are there. And they sum up their view of themselves in verse 33. And we seemed to ourselves like grasshoppers, and so we seemed to them. These people, they're so big and strong that we're just weaklings. We're just like grasshoppers compared to them. So whereas Caleb was confident that the people were well able to conquer the land, let's go up at once and occupy it, we can overcome it. The other spies really exaggerated the difficulties, and so they cast doubts into the minds of the people. We can't do it. They're too strong for us. And the consequences of this will be serious for the people. And we'll see that next week when we go into chapter 14 to see how all of this turns out. But from this evening's two chapters that we've looked at, there are perhaps some lessons that we can draw here, that we see the influence that our words can have on ourselves and upon others. We see Miriam and Aaron's challenge to Moses' position and authority, spoken perhaps out of jealousy and resentment towards Moses, but leading to Miriam's punishment there. We see the encouraging words spoken by Caleb, which tried to instill faith in the people and motivate them to action in going up to the land, that his words were designed to give encouragement to the people. And then in contrast to that is the negative report of the other spies, which will produce fear and a lack of faith, that we can't do this, we are too weak. So perhaps some lessons we can take from this about the words that we use and the influence that our words have upon other people, and how careful we have to be in choosing the right words and the right things to say. Perhaps you can draw some other lessons from this as well. But we'll stop here now.